dnešného webinára sú dvaja ľudia zo spoločnosti Mobicon, ktorá je, povedal by som takmer až, neviem, či globálnym, ale naozaj veľmi významným hráčom v rozvoji udržateľnej spoločnosti, prinajmenšom na európskom nebi, možno, že aj cez oceánskom. A je to pán Otto Cazemier a Eveline de Jong. Otta možno niektorí poznáte, pretože pred 2 rokmi na jeseň 2019 sa prezentoval jednu z kľúčových prednášok na národnej cyklokonferencii v Galante. A môžem dokonca o ňom povedať aj to, že dokonca, pokiaľ viem, tak on už bicykloval v socialistickom Československu ešte pred pádom opony. Takže mám také dojem, že východné Slovensko z bicykla pozná ešte za komunistického režimu. Ale to nie je predmetom dnešného webinára. Predmetom dnešného webinára je prezentácia alebo rozprávanie o tom, ako vytvoriť v hotovom meste, kde už stoja budovy, kde už sú ulice naplánované, postavené, chodia tady autá, ako do tohto priestoru, ako tento priestor zdieľať nielen medzi autami, ale aj medzi ostatnými účastníkmi premávky a najmä teda medzi tými, ktoré nás zaujímajú najviac, a to sú cyklisti a popri nich chodci. Dovolím si teda preto odovzdať slovo Ottovi a Eveline a veľmi sa teším na túto prednášku. Otto, môžeš ísť. Nazdieľaj si obrazovku a môžete ísť.
Okay, thank you, Jan, for your introduction, and very good that you remembered that I did cycle a long time ago in Czechoslovakia when that country still existed. But I also cycled in Slovakia last time that I was there at this conference in Galanta. And when I saw the video of the ambassador, I saw the Danube and the bridges, which I crossed on my bicycle last time when I were at your country. So on one hand, it's a very good way here to do this webinar online. On the other hand, I really miss to be with you and to do the discussions, maybe also afterwards with a beer, etc., etc. But the times are as they are, and I'm very happy that we, and I think it's an honor for us to present to you some examples of the Dutch cycling, the way of cycling, and how we do things in the Netherlands. And I hope that we can deliver online the same inspiration and knowledge exchange as we did 1.5 years ago in Galanta. I do this presentation together with my colleague Eveline de Jong, and after a few slides we will introduce ourselves a little bit more. So maybe you can go to the next one, Eveline. What are today's objectives? Jan already told that we come with some Dutch examples. We show you the Dutch approach, but be aware the Netherlands and Slovakia are different countries, and it's not just copy-paste to have the same facilities, the same things as we have in the Netherlands. So please use the information we share as inspiration, and be aware that maybe things are different in Slovakia from the Netherlands. And also be aware that where we are now in the Netherlands, it's not just a step that was taken on one moment. No, it was it took decades to be where we are now, and it started more or less in the 70s when we started to think about cycling as an important mean of transportation in our country. So what will we share with you today? Maybe the next one, Eveline, are the next following things. I will start with an introduction about cycling in the Netherlands, the why and the how, and the public perception. And I will come back to that. Why I will talk about that, because I think it's important that you know how we got where we are now. And then we go more into detail, how we organize the planning of our infrastructure, and how this developed the last decades towards the standards that we have now. And Eveline will take over then, because she's really an expert in infrastructure and network planning. So she can tell you all the details that are important, because, and we will show them in the examples, when it comes to cycling infrastructure, the devil is in the details, as you all might know. And we should be aware of making it convenient for cyclists, but also safe. And that's a very big issue. So we will tell about that when we go through the examples. Then we will give you some information about what are the advantages, but maybe there are also disadvantages of our approach. And we have a few slides of a tool, how you can do the planning process together with stakeholders, people that live somewhere, maybe shopkeepers, etc., and to share knowledge and how things can work out in a certain street. And then there is some time for discussion as well. But to start also with a short introduction, this is Mobycon. Actually, this used to be Mobycon, I think 2-3 years ago, because of sometimes people leave, sometimes new people come. We have a mission, and it says we want to make the society less dependent on cars. That doesn't mean that we are fighting against cars, but that we are fighting for good alternatives. And one of these alternatives is, of course, cycling. We also work on public transportation. We do this, as Jan said, well, not really globally, but in Europe. We have our offices in the Netherlands. We work a lot in UK, Germany, France, but we also have an office in Canada where we do work for Northern America, so mainly United States and Canada. And last year we developed, because of all the constraints in traveling and meeting, we developed the Mobicon Academy, where we share knowledge and expertise mainly on cycling. So if you're interested, maybe afterwards we can share some information about that. And in the Academy, there are also good examples that you can have a look at. Well, and who are we, Otto and Eveline? Well, I'm a senior consultant, strategic consultant. I have a lot of work experience on several topics within mobility management. One of them is public transportation. One of them is cycling, of course, but most of all, an integrated approach on mobility. And Eveline, do you want to introduce yourself shortly?
Yes, sure. So I'm Eveline Jong. I'm a consultant in urban mobility, and my work experience is mainly on infrastructure, network and street design, and also on traffic safety.
Okay, thank you. Well, then a few things about the Netherlands to make you aware of what country we are when it comes to cycling. So we have a question for you. How many bicycles does the average Dutch person own? Is this 0.4, 0.9, 1.3, 1.8? Well, you don't have to vote on one instrument or some. But it's interesting to think about it. What do you guess? And then we will give you the right answer. And the right answer is, next one, Eveline, 1.3. So we have slightly more bikes than inhabitants in the Netherlands. In 2017, we had almost 17 million inhabitants and 22.7 bicycles. That doesn't mean that every Dutch person has a bike, because there are also always groups that don't have a bike, and many people have two bikes, one for in the city, one for tourism, mountain bike, ATV, or speed bike, etc. Can you go to the next question, Eveline? What do you think that is the share of trips the Dutch make by bicycle? Is it 27, 32, 39, or 47? So please make up your mind. What do you think? and then we will give you the answer, and it's 27. And maybe some of you thought that it was a little bit more, but this are all trips, so all national trips, so also the long distance trips. So that makes this share is maybe a little bit lower than it is when it comes to just local trips. We have cities in the Netherlands where the share of cycling within the city goes up to 50%. So mainly in the cities, the share is really high and sometimes higher than the share of car trips. So we go to the third question, and that has nothing to do with cycling, but to show you that we have also other means of transportation in the Netherlands. What do you think? How many lanes has the widest motorway in the Netherlands? Is it 7? Or is it 10? Or is it 13? Or is it 19? And if you look well at the slide, I think you can already see it's not 7. But what do you think? Well, we will give you the answer. If the slide will move on. The right answer is 19. I don't ask you to count these lanes, but you should be aware that the Netherlands is not just cycling. We also have many car traffic, many cars. I think we have a very high, I think almost 8-9 million cars in the Netherlands. So almost every household has a car, and we use it also many times. So most people in the Netherlands, they can choose for their trips whether to use the bicycle or to use the car. And this is also important because most people in the Netherlands, one day they use the car and the other day they use the bicycle. So they can judge from different point of views what measures are good or bad, and they have a good, so to say, there is not a fight between car drivers and cyclists in most of the cases, because people use both means of transportation. So to combine all the information, we have almost 70 million inhabitants, 22 million bicycles, 1.3 per person. When we cycle, the average speed is between 15 and 18 kilometers an hour. So that's not like everyone is on the speed pedelec, but it's just the normal speed within the cities. And 50% of our trips on bicycle are made on dedicated cycle infrastructure. So that's also important, that our infrastructure supports very much the way we cycle. And what is also worth to mention is that 80% of the urban streets are in a 30 kilometers an hour zone. So within the cities, the speed reduction is very massive, so to say. So 80% of the streets has this 30 kilometers an hour regime. And there are, at the moment, discussions to have 30 kilometers an hour as the standard within cities, within villages. And many municipalities are working on that at the moment. So 50 or even faster, there will be the exemptions, and 30 will be the standard. So this was a little introduction about the Netherlands, and I will give you some more information. And this is about the question, how comes that public officers and other people involved, other actors, they agree with space for bicycles and not just for space for cars. And what is the attitude and the role of the police in that? I think this picture shows very well why this is. Because, as I told before, almost everyone in the Netherlands has a bike, and almost everyone in the Netherlands uses the bicycle. And this is our Prime Minister. I don't know whether you recognized him. He just won the elections of last week, and he always goes on his bike to the meetings he has. I think this is the palace of our king, probably. I see Eveline nodding, so So he visits the king, he uses his bicycle. Well, and this is not just a funny picture, but this is why we in the Netherlands, we are so happy with our cycling infrastructure, because all people cycle from the highest level to the lowest level, and also police officers uses their bicycle, and also public officers uses their bicycles, and they all have families with children, and children go on bicycle to school as well. So everyone in the Netherlands is aware of that cycling should be safe, and everyone is aware of that cycling has a lot of benefits. Not always when you drive your car, and sometimes you say, oh, these bicycles, they are so, but the next day you're on a bike yourself, and then you say, oh, those cars, they should move. So that's the way. That's not, no, it's not a way, it's how it comes that in the Netherlands there is a broad shared opinion on cycling. And there are, of course, differences between maybe political parties of how we deal with cycling, but the mainstream is that everyone supports cycling. It's not a real political issue at the moment. But it hasn't always been like that. So maybe you can show the next slide. These are pictures of Amsterdam, and the left slide, for me, the left slide was in the 70s, and the right one is as it is now. And as you see, in the 70s, there were many cars in the city, and today there is public space to be there, and there are some parked bicycles. So there was a change from the 70s to now for the position of cycling. And maybe you can show the next one, Eveline. Here you will see a short movie. It shows you a part of Amsterdam. I think this is the late 60s, and you see plenty of cars. So it was crowded, it was full. But today, the same area, when you look at it now, it really changed. And not just that the cars disappeared, but when cars disappear, there comes new space for new activities as well. So cycling is not just the reason, cycling is the mean to get a vital, a green, a livable city with a lot of functions and a pleasant place to stay. I thought our ambassador also mentioned this, that green and safe and pleasant cities are the main drivers supporting cycling infrastructure for bicycles. And what is behind this? That's the next one. Look at this. No, not again. This one. You see the space that is needed for the group of people that is in the left picture. When all these people use their car, this street is really filled with cars. So cars take a lot of space. When these people use public transportation, they go in a bus and they need just a very little space. And the same counts for when they use public transportation, when they use the bicycle. So if you have a city and you want to have all your facilities and things close by, and you want to travel in a surrounding that is pleasant, you don't have space to facilitate all those cars. And we know that. And that's why it changed from the 70s, when the number of cars rose, towards a cycling-friendly policy. Maybe you can show the next one, Eveline. Because, of course, there are many innovations in car transportation as well. But this issue of space stays the same, whether it's a normal traditional car or an electric one or a self-driving vehicle. They take too much space to facilitate in the city. And this will stay also in future. So also in future, cycling, walking, public transportation, they will be key for a livable city. And the next one, you can see some figures. You see that a driving car takes 140 square meters, a parked car even 20. If people travel by tram, this amount of square meters is just 7. And when you go on bicycle, it's just 5. And when you walk, it's just 2. So if you have not much space, which no one has in a city, you should focus on cycling, walking, and public transportation. Yesterday, we had a conference about public transportation in the Netherlands, and of course, the public transportation today suffers of the effects of COVID. But it was very clear that the mayors of our big 4 cities said, well, there's one thing for sure. When we want our cities to grow and we want to have pleasant cities, we should emphasize the development of public transportation and cycling. This is the only way that our cities can develop towards future. Okay, well, the next one, as I already told you, it's not just in one day. This was in the 70s, where it was a kind of pivot point. In the 60s, everyone was still auto-minded, and our planning system was also completely auto-oriented. But in the 70s, this changed. And this photo is about a group of people. They fought against traffic incidents mainly. It says, stop murdering children, because in the 70s, many children died in traffic because there were so many cars and people and children didn't have, of course, always space to play outside without getting into contact with the car traffic. So that was a pivot point in our history. And after the 70s, we built up this system. And when you look at how people today look at cycling, almost everyone likes cycling very much. Of course, it's cheap. It's the highest share. Is almost 90% of the people say, "Well, I cycle because it's cheap." But there are more things. You have some privacy more than in public transportation. You can travel independent. It's flexible. It's easy. It's quiet. So all these values of cycling, they help us when we work on cycling and when we cycle. And when you compare this list of qualities and you compare them how people think about driving a car, then driving a car is much less popular than riding a bicycle. And when you look at public transportation, it's even worse, because people use public transportation mainly because they have to go somewhere, not because they like it to be in a bus or in a tram. Of course, there are people they do like, but many people, they just have to use it. When they choose for the bicycle, they like the bicycle much more than the other modes. And this is something about what it brings us. You see on the bottom line, you see distance categories, and you see the share of means of transportation. And you see when the distances are very short, up to 1 kilometer. Walking is, of course, the main mode of transportation, but when it's around 2.5, 3 to 4 kilometers, then cycling is the most used mean of transportation. And in most cities, especially the Dutch cities, not the really big ones, within 3-4 kilometers, you can reach a lot of things, shops, your work, schools, etc. It's all within cycling reach. When people travel further, they start using their cars more. So that starts at 4 or 5 kilometers. And we hope, of course, that this will change, because many people today have an electric bicycle, a pedelec, and where you can easily use it also for longer distances. To finalize this part of the presentation is what can you do as you are in Slovakia and you want to work on cycling and improve it, and maybe there is some resistance somewhere in the organization or around you or at police. It's not just telling facts of that it's better for this or better for that. And this is Chris Brundtlet. He's he's a big cycling advocate, so to say, and he says, don't bring facts, tell the stories. And that is also what we want to do from the Netherlands. So we have a lot of stories, and we can show how things developed So if you go to the next one, Eveline, we have very nice examples. And you all know Amsterdam, it's a kind of iconic city, but it's not an example for the rest of the world. Maybe you could better look at the city of Groningen. It's a little bit smaller, 200,000 inhabitants, but a very, very good policy on bicycle, very good infrastructure as well, and a high share of bicycle usage. The same counts for Zwolle. It's even a little bit smaller. Zwolle is the capital of cycling, as we say, because it has in the Netherlands the highest share of cycling within the city, and also a history from the 70s on building a dedicated infrastructure for cyclists. Utrecht and of course Copenhagen, we should mention that as well. In Denmark is also a good example. You should tell the arguments and repeat the arguments. And what is important, sometimes you have to, if you can't win, join them. So be aware of the other arguments and try to make things fit for more than one interest, one stakeholder. Take in account other interests and values. Oh yeah, and be aware that when you have a good cycling infrastructure, in many cases this also helps that car driving can go on smoothly, especially in cities like Zwolle, but also Groningen, where you have separated infrastructure. Car driving is also good, well facilitated by cycling infrastructure. Now on Mobicon Academy, we have a study tour about Houten. It's not on the slide, but Houten is really built as a cycling city in the 70s and 80s. So you can have a look at it. And we will have a study tour about Zwolle at the end of April, hopefully. So if you're interested, you can have a look at it as well. Be aware that many people that are working in transportation sector are mainly men between 20, maybe 55, 60 years old. Who likes cars most? I myself as well. We like cars because it's technical, it's fast, it's etc., etc. But there are other groups in society. They don't have anything with cars. They have other transportation needs, different attitudes, like younger children, like elderly, like women. So be aware that there are more groups in society that could be useful to support you when you want to work on cycling. And what is the lowest line? I told it, for the devil is in the detail. So if you work on cycling, you want to do it good, be aware of small mistakes that can have big effects, especially when it comes to safety. Eveline will tell you more about that. And last but not least, and then we go on to the more technical part of the infrastructure planning. Use public participation. So if you talk with people, if you work together, designing a street, designing a network, you get support from society, and not just from a small group of people, but from the people you work for. I go on with sustainable safety. Udžateľná naar bezpečnosť, I see. And this is a program in the Netherlands that we have already for, I think, 25, 30 years we work on. And it's the basis for how we plan our infrastructure. And we needed it very much because, as you see in the next slides, we used to have many accidents, fatalities in traffic. In the 70s, this was up to 3,500 fatalities a year in a much smaller population than we have today. And you see it went down. So we had to take a lot of measures for safety. And at the end of the 90s, we started this sustainable safety program. And today we want to go even further from sustainable safety towards a vision zero, where we work on a vision where we actually have zero people that die in traffic. Of course, this is very difficult, but in our thinking, we have to be aware of how can we get there. Sustainable safety was implemented from 1997, and it led to an enormous decrease in fatalities. And today we still aim at further reduction of incidents and fatalities. And we do this not just by infrastructure, but infrastructure is an important part of it. The principles of sustainable safety are on the next slides. It starts with functionality. So when we have our road category, our road types, the functionality of the road is a very important one to consider. Roads should be homogeneous within the category. So when you drive somewhere, you should see in one view, oh, I'm on the road type this. It should be recognizable. And last but not least, it should be forgiveness. That means that when someone makes a mistake, it shouldn't be directly fatal, because of the infrastructure is like that, that one mistake can be compensated some way, somehow. Then we have three types of streets. The first one are the distributor roads. So these are the main roads where the traffic function is the most important, of course. Then we have access streets, access roads, where you go from the distributor into a city or into the neighborhood. And we have the what we call erf. It's translated here. It's mainly a residential area where people have to drive really slowly, up to 15 kilometers an hour, where public space is mainly public space to be there, and cars are just allowed to get there and to stand there. So when you look at the next slides, you can see what this means for cycling. Our highways and urban highways with high speeds, there is no cycling on it, of course. For us, this is, of course, not in all countries, this is the same. But these roads are just for car traffic. Then we have the connector roads, and it's in rural areas. It has a maximum speed of 80 kilometers an hour, and in urban streets, 50 kilometers an hour. And on these streets, we should have a separated cycle path. So that's the standard for these streets. And on the right, you see the access roads, and one is in rural area and one is in the city. You see the maximum speed is in rural areas reduced to 60 kilometers an hour, and in urban surroundings to 30 kilometers an hour. And with these low speeds, you have mixed use of the streets. So bicycles and cars go together. So the principle is that when speed is high, you separate cyclists and cars. When cyclists and cars cannot be separated, the speed should be low. And we do this to 30 kilometers and 60 kilometers in the rural areas. And when you look at the slides on the right hand above, so the 60 kilometer street, you see these white lines. These are not to indicate a cycle lane, but these are just to mark the edges of the street. So these are the principles of sustainable safety applied on our road categorization. So this is where we are, and this is the challenge. And Eveline will tell you more about some streets and examples. This is an interesting slide. When you look at cycling fatalities, you see we have still a big challenge, mainly at the group of elderly, because the biggest group of fatalities are men of 80 plus. So people in the Netherlands, they cycle at high age. My father, he's 92. he goes to my mother every day, cycles 5 kilometers one way, 5 kilometers back. And sometimes this feels a little bit uncomfortable because elderly people, it's just like children. And you see these figures, and so we have many people in this elderly category that have problems in our traffic system. When you look at the one in 2008, you see that the biggest category used to be car drivers, the younger car drivers. And this group has become better. So the cyclists are now the main challenge for us to work on. Eveline, may I give you the floor to tell something about examples in the Netherlands?
Yes, thank you, Otto. So for some examples, we will first go into the network part. Yes, so here we see the city of Gouda, the road categorization. And you can see that there are a number of different roads. So you have the red road is the through road, so that's a highway with 120 kilometers per hour. Then you have the distributor road on the edges of the town in blue outside of the urban area and green inside the urban area. But most of this map is not in the color, and that means that it's all 30 kilometers per hour zones. So most of the town just has mixed use in 30 kilometers per hour. You can see that in the zones of Gouda as well. So each zone has a boundary around it, and that's where the roads are. So the more important through roads. And the city center is also important, and you even have a pedestrian zone, the red one here, where there are no cars allowed, or less cars. So there's really a hierarchy in the number of roads in Gouda. And if you look at the cycle network, you can see that the cycle network is much more has a much higher density compared to the car network. So there are a lot more lines in the cycle network, but most of the cycle network is still just on 30 kilometers per hour roads. So roads that have mixed use and don't have a separate cycle track can also be part of the cycle network when there are fewer cars. But we also have more important cycle roads. So you have the primary cycle routes, so the blue ones are mostly either cycle streets, so with a lot more cyclists than cars, or you have separated cycling facilities. If you look at the sustainable safety principle, we want to have every street looking almost the same. So for distributor road with 50 kilometers per hour, we want to separate cyclists from the motorized traffic. So in the left, you see the ideal situation, on the right, the minimal situation. On the left, the ideal situation, you have separated facilities. You have enough space for the cars. There is even a buffer in between the two sides of cars. And there's a lot of space for green. But this is not, we cannot build this everywhere, because also in the Netherlands, we have spaces that are quite tight. So we also have a minimal variant. So you have less space, but you still want separated cycle facilities. So in this case, with the red and the markings on top of it, it means that cars are not allowed to be on the cycle lane. So there is a cycle lane, but cars are not allowed to use it. And cars are not separated from each other. So this is a little bit less forgiving than the other one, because there's enough space for people to correct themselves, also between motorized traffic and the cyclists. But on this case, the speed will be lower, because people will conceive this as more risky. So if we look at the access streets, we can see that it's all not that technical. So on access roads, you want to have slow speeds, you want to have it self-explanatory. Mostly want it to be a living area. So we don't have the markings on the road, we just have open pavement on the ideal situation. You don't have any markings or pieces where where things are marked off. In the minimal variant, you maybe don't have the means to have an open pavement, so maybe you have asphalt. And so that means that you can have speed bumps in the road to slow cars down. Maybe the street is a bit more wide as well. So if we then look at intersections, so for two access streets, you don't want to have a very technical appearance, but we want to make people aware that they have to pay attention on this spot. So we raise the junction, so a raised platform with these markings as well. And we don't want any difference in the coloring, so people know that you just give priority to the people on your right, and you don't have priority for just one direction going forth. While on a junction from a distributor road and an access road, the access road is a 30 kilometers per hour zone, much more living street kind of. And the through road, distributor road is more for traffic, so that has priority over the smaller street, so with less traffic. And here you can also see the difference between separated cycle facilities here and no cycle facilities here. And we call this an exit construction, just to show a different way to show who has priority in a more also a pedestrian friendly way, because in this situation pedestrians also have right of way in this case, and cyclists as well. But we also have bigger roads, so you have the junction of two distributor roads. You can do it in a priority junction, or if you have more traffic in a signalized intersection. But the most safe option is the roundabout. That also has the most use of space. Well, maybe not compared to the traffic signal roundabout, but this one can be quite small. And the most significant thing about these junctions compared to the one of the two access roads is that there's a lot more space between cyclists and motorized vehicles. So you can see the little islands here. That's to separate cyclists from the cars and to have them, give them enough buffer space as well. And here in the roundabout as well, just enough space that cars can stop here and then give right of way to the cyclists, because they also have priority on the roundabout, and then go on their way. So now I have a real example in Rotterdam. So this used to be an intersection with traffic lights, and traffic lights are a lot less safe than a roundabout. So they now change it to this. So this roundabout has the same capacity as the one with the previous intersection with the traffic lights, has the same capacity as a roundabout, but now cars can just go through, wait for a cyclist, and then go on their way without having to wait for a traffic light. So lots more safe compared to the previous situation. We also have the bicycle streets. Those are fairly new. We consider a bicycle street if there are more cyclists than cars, and also if there's no through traffic. So we don't want to have a through road as a cycle street, because we mainly want to have cyclists on it and not have cars speeding by. In this case, the car is a guest, so they have to stay behind the cyclist, and only if they can pass safely, then they can pass safely. We use the red asphalt to indicate cycle street, and the sign here say cars are guests here. So that's evolution of our streets. We also have a new type of roundabout in Zwolle. This is a cycle roundabout. So in this case, the car traffic is only allowed to go one way. So only through this intersection. And oh no. And the cyclists use this intersection as a roundabout. So cyclists have priority. There's a main cycle route here on this side and a 30 km/h street on this side. And this way, cyclists can have priority while cars can just pass through and also limit their speed, because when they have to zigzag through this roundabout, they also have to slow down. So I now have some examples from the Netherlands to show you that we are not perfect. We don't always do it right. This is in the town of Delft, pretty close to where I live. And yes, normally I would ask the audience, do you know what is wrong here? And then someone would answer, but in this case, I will do it myself. So in this case, if you are a cyclist, you want to turn left and you're standing here, you don't have any physical separation. So this is a 50 km/h road. You don't have any separation when the car, the traffic light is green and people, the cars are just running through this intersection and you want to turn left, you have to wait here before you can actually turn towards here. So it's not safe when the car light is green, but also when the car light is not green, you have to wait here. There's not that much traffic. You don't have any physical separation. So if people don't pay attention or want to switch at the last moment to the left side, you're trapped in between. So don't do this. So we also have this example that's in, it's not in the Netherlands, I don't know where it is, but it has a very big OFAS, we call this, so a very big space for cyclists to center themselves. In this case, also, it's quite a lot of space with 2 rows of cars behind you. You don't feel this as a safe space to stand and wait for your traffic light to turn green. Don't do this. But you can do this. So with only 1 lane of traffic behind you, or this, I'm very sorry about the low quality of this photo. We don't have any better ones yet. Then we have Copenhagen, also a nice place to cycle, but we also wouldn't advise you to do this. And it's also the same case as the previous one. If you're standing here, you don't have any separation between yourself and maybe the bus that is coming from here and wants to turn right. There's nothing standing in between. You can also see the markings on the pavement. There's nothing in between you standing here and the car traffic that's going all around you. So please also don't do this. Then we have this slide. Yes, so the benefits from sustainable safety, it's that it's a relatively safe and pleasant way of cycling. But still in the Netherlands, there's a world to win. So we do have guidelines, but not all our infrastructure is already adjusted to those guidelines. There's also quite a lot of cars still yet. So we also say there are a lot of cars and you do have a 30 km/h road. Maybe it's still not safe as a cyclist to be there because there's just a lot of cars there. And then still in volume, you're still not entirely safe. So further reduction of the number of cars in city centers are also necessary. And we are also still dependent on the enforcement of the street design. So in the case of a 30 km/h road, police officers only will check if people are driving 30 km/h if the guidelines are followed through. So if you maybe don't have the correct width of the road, or you don't use the right material, then they will say, yeah, but your road just doesn't look very much like the 30 km/h road. So we don't enforce here. So that's still a world to win. Then we have a bit of street sketch. So Street Sketch is an online design tool, and it's based on the USA tool Street Mix. So that was an open source tool, and we developed it and put in more Dutch elements to also make it more usable for us. So many street design elements, such as the cobblestone road and that sort of thing, and you can drag and drop the section design here as well. So you can make it from this situation with this, which also has a cycle path here as well, on the right and the left side, but still a lot of space for cars. And maybe you can turn it into this. So it's more, you concentrate the car traffic here, and you can have more space for pedestrians and also cyclists here, in this case. And you can also have a bicycle street. So maybe in the same space, you can reduce the car traffic even more and have more space for the cyclists. And this creates also a more boulevard type of feel for the pedestrians. So you can visit our website for this, but at the moment, Street Sketch is under construction, unfortunately. So we're still working on improving this version, and the new version will be online very soon, we hope. So thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, you are free to ask.
Ďakujem pekne aj Ottovi, aj Eveline. Pravda je, že je to taký rýchlo kurz, to znamená, že nie je úplne všetko si človek musí uvedomiť. Ja len pripomeniem teda, že tá prezentácia bude dostupná na stránke, aby ste si mohli tie obrázky ešte raz pozrieť, pretože nad každým jednom by sa dalo rozprávať alebo sedieť a meditovať, nad každým jedným príkladom 10 minút. Máme dve otázky, ktoré sa týkajú priamo od tej prezentácie. Michal sa pýta jednu vec, a to, že aké je najlepšie odbočenie doľava pri viacpruhových križovatkách. To nebolo celkom jasné z tej prezentácie, že teda keď máme viac pruhov, tak predpokladám, že sa pýta, že prečo tam nemôže byť ten predsunutý priestor, alebo teda aké je najlepšie riešenie odbočenia doľava pri viacpruhovej križovatke.
Yeah, Eveline?
Yes, so I think in this case, so if you look at this intersection, the best way to turn left would be if you move this lane towards this side, towards the middle, then you could have the space that is now taken up by this lane as a buffer space. So you could have a separated facility for this cycle infrastructure. And then you would have a pocket here. And there you could wait to turn left. So you have a two-stage left. That is the most appropriate way. So I think if we have it in this.
Priprav si otázky, ja dám ešte jednu otázku.
You can, if you turn here, then you have enough space here, but maybe you don't have that always, but that's the most safe way to turn left. So in two stages. And for the case of this one, it would be more safe if there was only one lane here. So if you have one lane going through for the traffic turning left, going through and turning right, and then you have this space to stand, then it would be more safe. Because you only have one car lane of traffic behind you. I hope this answers your question.
Ďakujem pekne. Predpokladám, že toto je ten kľúčový obrázok, že radšej, ak dobre rozumiem, tak radšej zlúčiť tie pruhy do jedného, ako mať dva pruhy pre odbočenie. Ale môžeme o tom potom dať ešte debatu. Ďalšia otázka je od Mira a pýta sa, že či považujú za zmyselné alebo teda za účelné v mestách, kde zatiaľ nie je cyklová infraštruktúra, značiť cyklopruhy iba farbou na cestách. Teda, že či to má skôr taký účinok, že to pritiahne a poteší ľudí, ktorí jazdia na bicykli, alebo či to má nejaký zmysel. Alebo či je účelné rovno preskočiť fázu malovania čiar a snažiť sa o segregované trasy.
Also for you, Eveline.
Yes. So if you don't have any cycle facilities yet, I think you would first look at the network level, because if you have only space on one street to have segregated facilities and you don't have any space anywhere else to do anything, then it will not help you, because you really have to have a network of cycle facilities or cycle safe spaces. We see in Northern America that they use mainly planters and that sort of thing to create a small buffer in between your cycle lane or cycle path and the road traffic. So I would look into those smaller solutions, so you do have a separation, a little barrier between your cycle path and your motorized traffic, if it is at a higher speed than 30 kilometers per hour. Under 30 kilometers per hour, you can mix traffic relatively safe.
Ďakujem pekne. To je možno aj trošku taká odpoveď, že vlastne keď nevieme dať separovaný pruh, tak potom umiestniť nejaké oddelovače, nejaké separátory na vozovku. Takže je to taký akoby poloseparovaný pruh. Ďalšiu otázku má Petra. Petra sa pýta, ako dlho trvalo presadiť obmedzenie rýchlosti 30 km na 80% ulic v tom meste Gouda. Bolo to jednoduché, bolo to zložité?
Do you know, Eveline, or shall I try to give an answer?
You can.
Yeah, I think we mainly started at the end of the 90s with this categorization where 30 was an important part of. So we're now in 21. So and I think our figures were from maybe 2018, 2019. So it took us 20 years. And because these were guidelines, people could. Every now and then, when a street is under construction, for instance, for canalization or something like that, then it reappears as a 30 kilometers an hour street. And when you have this period of 20, 25 years, then you reach this amount of 80%. So it's done step by step.
Poprosím Andreju teraz, aby dala niektorú z tých otázok, ktoré prišli ešte mailom vopred, aby sme aj tým trošku vyhoveli. A poprosím vás, tí, ktorí dávate otázky, dávajte ich v slovenčine, pretože nie je ľahké naraz prekladať do angličtiny, do slovenčiny a potom sa to zase pýtať. Takže Martin, prosím ťa, spýtaj sa ešte raz v v slovenčine, ak ťa to zaujíma. Andrea, máš tam nejaké otázky?
Áno, mám napríklad otázku, že aká úloha polície je v pouličnom dizajne v Holandsku? Že či polícia má právo to najvyššie, alebo v rámci hierarchie, aké právo má polícia napríklad zamietnúť alebo odporučiť nejaké iné riešenia?
I think the police is just advising, but maybe you know different situations, Eveline, but I know that they do advise, and they have this instrument of not enforcing when they think it's not good, but they have no veto right or something. Is that correct, Eveline? Yes. And of course, they have their opinion, and you should listen because they are also a part of our traffic system, and they are aware of risks, etc.
Yes, we consider the police as one of the stakeholders. We also have emergency services and maybe the bus providers that are also, we also consult with them to ask them about the width of the road mainly, and if they can pass through when there's an emergency or just for a normal bus line. And the police also is consulted during the design process.
Ďakujem pekne. Len aby vedeli naši holandskí lektori, na Slovensku má dopravná polícia veľmi veľké slovo a v praxi, možno sú tu nejakí policajti, môžeme o tom rozprávať, ale v praxi dosť často bránia rozvoju bezpečnej infraštruktúry, pretože sa obávajú, že to bude nebezpečné pre cyklistov a pre chodcov. Na Slovensku má polícia veľmi silné slovo. Máme otázku v čete, jednu zablúdenú. Hanna sa pýta, že keď sa mení ulica, miestna komunikácia na bicyklovú ulicu, tak či je to spoločná dohoda obyvateľov, alebo kto o tom rozhodne? Čo si o tom myslia tí obyvatelia, ktorí tam bývajú, majú tam autá, chcú tam parkovať? Ako prebieha tento proces?
Yeah, it's mainly the municipality that decides, because it's their street and they have to apply the guidelines on the design of the street. But of course, they start first talking with the people that live there and that use the street. But people that live somewhere, they're mostly much in favor of a fietsstraat, cycling streets, because it makes the streets safer, pleasant, lower speed, less pollution, less noise. Or am I wrong, Eveline? Are there also situations that you know that people are against of converting their street to a cycling street?
No, I don't think so. Mostly because there's also a lower speed limit of 30 if there wasn't already.
Yeah. So when there is a discussion, sometimes there's a discussion with the shopkeepers, because they consider the accessibility of the street by car is very important, of course. And sometimes they're not very happy, but no, there's not much discussion about cycling streets. Many people support the idea and the implementation. And I would like to come back to this question of the role of the police. I think it's also very much a cultural thing, because I think in Slovakia, the police officers, they always drive a car, where in the Netherlands, many police officers, they go on bicycle in the city. And that's that they want to be easily to talk with, and that they can come everywhere in the small places where you can't go by car. So I think that's a quite different situation in the Netherlands with the police as in Slovakia. It's really a cultural difference. So maybe you should try to let your police officer also give them a very beautiful speed pedelec or something, and maybe they get enthusiastic about it and start cycling as well. And as soon as you cycle yourself, also during a duty, it makes you much more that you know what the problems are from the point of view of the cyclist.
Ja si dovolím len doplniť, lebo možno to nie je úplne všetkým jasné, na tie bicyklové ulice nie je zakázaný vjazd autom, auta tam môžu chodiť, ale musia teda v plnej miere rešpektovať cyklistov, je tam obmedzená rýchlosť, nesmú cyklistov ohroziť, ale môžu tam chodiť. To znamená, nie je to vyslovene, že ako u nás cyklistická cestička, je to ulica, kde je zmiešaná premávka, ale tie auta tam majú skutočne minimálne práva. Tá značka vpravo dole na tomto slajde, ona je taká modrá, keď ju vidíte na tom slepe, tak tam je nápis, to ani nie je dopravná značka, to je len taký oznam, to je len taký panel, ktorý hovorí, že auto je tu iba hosť, pričom to nie je dopravná značka, to je len, a pritom je to široko používané. Máme potom ďalšiu otázku, ktorá je možno, že na Eveline, ak to vie z hlavy, a to je, že akú šírku pruhov, či už pre auta alebo pre bicykle, majú tie zberné komunikácie, to znamená distributor roads. Ako majú šírku pruhov? Vieme to?
Yes, so I brought up this picture. So this distributor road, this would be around 3 or 3.2 meters. And the cycle facility for one way would be at minimal 2 meters, but that's considered quite narrow. So we would like it more like 2.5 or 3 meters. And you would want a space of around 1 meter at least in between the road and the cycle facility. And if it's a two-way cycle facility, so only on one side of the road or maybe on two sides of the road, you would have at least a 3 meter wide cycle facility.
A ja mám k tomu doplňujúcu otázku. To znamená, že ak sa tam nezmestia pruhy, tak sa musí znížiť rýchlosť. Hej?
Yes. So if you cannot fit in separated cycle facilities, you would want to mix the bicycles with the cars. And that would mean slowing down the cars to 30 kilometers per hour at the highest.
Ďakujem. Andrea, máš tam nejaké otázky?
Máme takú zaujímavú otázku, že koľko trvá v Holandsku, približne, samozrejme je to individuálne, ale
pomalšie.
Koľko trvá od nápadu zrealizovať cyklotrasu až po realizáciu, približne?
Yeah, it depends very much on the situation. Sometimes it takes years and years. It depends on money, it depends on land ownership. It depends on maybe people that have objections against the planned infrastructure. So sometimes it goes very quick, maybe 2 or 3 years, but maybe it take 10 years or even longer, or even the idea will never come out.
Yeah, I think in a case that we did just a couple of months ago, we had the first idea of a street in maybe the end of 2018 end of 2018. Then we started the design process, and we finished that in maybe half a year to 3/4 of a year, also with a lot of participation with the residents and people living around it, and police and everyone, emergency services. And they're starting construction. They've started construction already. So between also the ending of the design phase, which was in July of last year, and then the beginning of the construction, that was just this January. So there's also half year in between that as well. So 2 to 3 years, if you're lucky.
Yeah, we worked on a bicycle connection here in Zwolle, where we needed a bridge, and I think we did the first design for this bridge in maybe 1997, and the bridge was built in 2013. So that was more than 15 years later. So they're very different periods.
Ďakujem pekne. Ďalšia otázka je od Agaty a ja ju trošku rozšírim. Doteraz sa bavíme najmä o cyklistické doprave v mestách. Ako je to v medzimestskom priestore? Platia tieto pravidlá udržateľnej bezpečnosti aj v medzimestskom priestore? A je v Holandsku nejaká koncepcia na budovanie trás, ktoré sa dajú využívať na cestovný ruch a na rekreáciu? To znamená trasy, ktoré spájajú nielen ulice, nielen v meste, ale aj napríklad zaujímavé turistické ciele?
Yeah. The rules of sustainable safety apply also outside the towns. So you see the what is the name in English? Spojovacia cesta. That's in a rural area, and it's an 80 kilometers road. So you need a segregated cycle path. And when you have this other road in rural area, have a look at the English name. What is the English name?
Access road.
Access roads in rural area. Then the standard is 60 kilometers an hour, and then you can mix. And these 60 kilometers an hour roads outside the towns, you have very many of them, and they are also part of the recreational network. We have in the Netherlands an extended network of knooppunten. What's in knooppunt, Eveline?
Connector.
Connecting. Every crossing has a number, and so you can plan your recreational route. Just have a look and write down the numbers, and you know I'm at 23, so now I have to go to 27, and so you can make beautiful tours. And these are mainly on whether segregated cycle paths or on the 60 kilometers streets. So and sometimes this is an issue, because the 60 kilometer streets, especially when there are many school children cycling in the early morning or the late evening when it may be dark in winter, there's also agricultural traffic on these streets. And this agricultural traffic, these machines are getting bigger and bigger every year. So it's considered very unpleasant and dangerous when these two groups mix. So I think the next step will be to have a network of this for this agricultural traffic, and to take care of safe segregated infrastructure for especially school children that cycle in rural areas.
Yes, I think there's quite a lot of discussion in the Netherlands about these 60 km/h roads, because that's quite a high speed to mix the car traffic and especially school children cycling. We mainly want to block through traffic from these roads, so sometimes they use this as a way to travel faster when there's a too much traffic on the higher grade roads, so they just take a detour through the country and drive really fast, and we really want to stop that. And some of the rural roads are also designed at 30 kilometers per hour when they're very narrow, because sometimes they are. So that's also a development there.
I think speeding on the 60 kilometers an hour roads is an issue, because enforcement is not possible, because there are not many cars and there are many roads. And it's very difficult for people to keep the 60 kilometers an hour when you're driving a car on a street like this.
Ďakujem. Vrátime sa zase do mesta. Neviem celkom presne, či tú otázku dobre pretlmočím, alebo teda prerozprávam. Pri úpravách dopravného riešenia ulice, pýta sa Sebastian, pri úpravách dopravného riešenia ulice, či sa tieto úpravy dejú aj v súvislosti napríklad s výstavbou, ktorá je na tej ulice. To znamená, že či sa využíva, máme podobnú otázku aj v mailoch, či sa využíva to, že je tam nejaká novostavba, nejaká investícia, a či má taký investor, taký developer, či má povinnosť zapracovať potreby zraniteľných účastníkov alebo nemotorovej dopravy do svojej investície. To je vlastne taká otázka. Trošku som ju zjednodušil, Sebastian.
Yeah, I don't know whether I understand the question very well, but normally the project developer, as we call them, the people that build, or organizations that build buildings or houses, etc., they do just the development of their own property, and not the public space where the road is and where the cycle path is. So, as far as I know, there is a division of roles between these private developers. They build the house or the building or the offices, etc., and the municipality, they build the roads and the cycling infrastructure, responsible for that. Maybe when there is some damage of the public roads, then the developer has to repair it, of course. But it's not like that people that do the development of a building or a living area, that they also do the building of the infrastructure.
Just to add to that, the developer of like a neighborhood also takes into account the design of the road in their development, but the design of the construction of the road is done by the municipality, and the design of the road is also checked by the municipality. So they have a say in how it should be organized, but the developer actually designs it or draws it in their plan. And they do have to take into consideration if there is a main cycle route, so separated cycle facilities or a bicycle street or that sort of thing. They do have to take that into consideration.
Peter sa pýta otázku, že tieto opatrenia, o ktorých sa rozprávame, sú častokrát veľmi drahé na slovenské pomery. Existujú nejaké menej nákladné riešenia upokojovania dopravy, ktoré by ste odporúčali? Na Slovensku nie sú veľmi populárne. Ako je to v Holandsku? Existujú lacnejšie riešenia?
Yeah, well, I think that all infrastructure you build, it always has its price, and also in the Netherlands, the costs are an issue, especially when you want to build a roundabout. These are big investments you make in the network. Where there are cheaper possibilities of calming is maybe to close down a street or to cut it halfway. I don't know whether that is what you mean. And of course you have ramps in several types. And the one is more convenient or one is better. Also take in account bus traffic, and other are maybe cheaper. I don't know, do you know, Eveline, of what are especially cheaper solutions for calming or facilitating cycling?
Well, I mostly think then of solutions of maintaining the existing profile of the road and just using temporary barriers like planters or that sort of thing to indicate where the cyclists go and have them as a separated space from the cars. And then you can also make the road more narrow without touching the underground material. But in most cases, infrastructural changes are quite expensive. Yeah.
Máme ďalšiu otázku, ešte kým dám slovo Adi, tuto v diskusii. Či sa používajú v Holandsku zmiešané chodníky alebo zdieľané chodníky cyklisti, chodci a aké sú tam potom technické nejaké parametre?
Will you answer, Eveline? Or?
Yeah, I think we prefer to have cyclists separated from pedestrians, especially when there's quite a large number of them. In rural areas, you can mostly see that there are no footpaths available for pedestrians, so they can use the cycle path. So mainly the cycle path there is a little bit wider, but still it's not the most ideal situation. And inside the urban area, we only want to mix them when we know that they have a very low speed. So you can have a pedestrian area that is also available for cyclists, but you really want to have cyclists then slow down and adjust to the pedestrians that are already walking there. So they are guests.
Yeah. This is a theme that's where we have some work on, because mainly these pedestrian zones, it doesn't always goes well that cyclists behave the way we want them to drive slowly. Well, we're in the Netherlands, we work on new guidelines to facilitate the mix of pedestrians and cyclists, but it's mainly cyclists in pedestrian zones and not like pedestrians on a cycle path.
Ja k tomu len dodám svoju skúsenosť z Holandska, konkrétne z mesta Delft, odkiaľ je Eveline. Takisto ako na bicyklových uliciach je značka auto je tu hosť, tak na pešej zóne je takmer taká istá značka cyklista je tu iba hosť. To znamená, vždy ten slabší účastník má väčšiu prioritu a ten silnejší účastník je tam vždy iba hosť. A myslím, že to celkom aj pekne funguje. Aďa, máš tam nejaké otázky?
No, mám tu takú otázku, že je zrejme, že Holandsko teda investuje pomerne hodne financií do priestoru pre cyklistov a otázka je, že kto hlavne financuje ako keby ten priestor pre tých cyklistov. Financuje to hlavne štát, samospráva, alebo dokonca bola táto pôda pod cyklotrasy znárodnená, vyvlastnená, že ako to vlastne je, že sa im podarilo toľko priestoru získať pre cyklistov.
No. Yeah. The owner pays for the infrastructure. That's the basic rule. So that means that within a municipality, the roads are the municipality is owner of the roads, so the municipality has to pay for all the infrastructure. In rural areas, there is also cycling infrastructure along regional roads. So then the region, in the Netherlands, we call them provinces, they pay for this infrastructure. And we also have some water boards, they own also cycling infrastructure, but it's quite specific. So, but the basic is who owns will pay. But at the moment, the regions, the provinces, they want to stimulate cycling, and they have money for that. So they do also funding for local infrastructure. Sometimes this is 50%, sometimes there's a different percentage. So that's how they stimulate municipalities to work on their cycling infrastructure. And when it comes to the national states, they don't own cycling infrastructure, maybe a very little bit, but they are involved in cycling policy. Our last two governments, they spent some hundreds of millions, I think, or was it tens of millions? I'm not quite sure. But this was our last government. They paid especially for parking facilities around railway stations, because our rail system is, of course, the backbone of our national transportation system. The rail system is also a national transport system. And many people come by bicycle or go by bicycle from the station to the station. And there was not enough capacity, not enough quality to facilitate all these bicycles at the railway station. So we have at the moment a very new one in Utrecht, which is said to be the biggest of the world, with thousands of parked bicycles. And there was just opened maybe 2 weeks ago a new underground parking facility at the railway station in Zwolle. And this is all financed by the state. I don't know whether they pay 100% or maybe 75 or something like that. So in many cases, there's a mix of institutions that pay for the infrastructure from the basic that the owner normally pays for that. One recent development is that our national government asked the provinces maybe half a year or 3-4 months ago, please come with your plans for the regional network cycling and maybe other plans considering cycling. And we put them all together, and this pile of plans is part of the negotiations that will start next week, maybe in 2 weeks, for the new government. So we hope that the new government will have money for the regions and the municipalities to improve the network. Something to add, Eveline? Okay.
Ďakujem pekne. Pomaličky pôjdeme ku koncu, pretože webinár je tlmočený a prekladateľka ide bez striedania, ale pokúsime sa technicky spraviť, aby ešte bol voľná diskusia s obidvomi lektormi po ukončení. Asi možno jedna z posledných otázok. Michal sa pýta, že v Holandsku sa ukazuje, že 10 až 15% ľudí porušuje dopravné predpisy, zatiaľ čo v Dánsku iba 5%. Čím to vysvetľujete? Prečo tí Dáni, ktorí sú rovnako rozvinutá krajina cyklisticky, prečo sú tam poslušnejší?
I would like to hand it over to Eveline, but I will try myself. Actually, I don't really know. I think maybe Dutch people are a little bit more anarchistic or something than the Danish. Danish are maybe, I think there are not much difference. Maybe there's also the measurement could be different, because I don't consider the Dutch to be very bad at following the rules. But I think in both countries, we consider rules as guidelines. And for instance, I think there is a difference between the Netherlands and Germany, for instance. When you look at pedestrian crossings in Germany, when the pedestrian crossing red is light, the light is red, and there is no car coming in from any side, people keep waiting. In the Netherlands, Dutch people don't wait when there is no car coming, when the traffic light is red. So it's a cultural thing, I think. And no, let's not say more.
Ďakujem pekne. Aďa, máš tam ešte nejakú otázku, ktorá stojí za to?
Neviem, ešte by som sa opýtala, že to sa pýta kolega, že či je súčasťou projektovania a výstavby cyklotrás aj výsadba zelene, stromov, skrátka, či je to nejaké oficiálne pravidlo, že pri výstavbe cyklotrasy je súčasťou aj teda riešenie zelene.
I don't know exactly. Do you know, Eveline? I know there's a rule about compensation when a new cycle path is built where there maybe are trees, and the trees have to be removed, and you always have to plant these trees anew on another place. But there's an obligation to have green space around cycle path. I don't know. I don't think so.
No, I think there's a wish for most municipalities and also the people around them to have more green. So when you're looking at the cycle infrastructure, you also look at if you take away maybe car space, if you can also assign something to more green space, because it's always fine and well. And in some cases, like in the city of Utrecht, they also got extra funding from the province if they put in more green, because that was better for the water. So if it rained and you have less pavement on your street and more green, then the water clears more easily. So they could get extra funding for the road if they had also more green.